to love our guest for today's podcast. I first met Matt around a fire and a chair. And I said to him, "What do you do?" And his response was this: "I'm here to whisper in the ears of kings and queens." Needless to say, I wanted to get to know Matt. And as I found out, he is the co-founder and creative director of Mentored Media, which looks after well-known marquee brands both internationally and nationally, and celebrities and well-known public figures, whether they're politicians, business people, or sports stars. I also love Mac's backstory. He was adopted by an Australian couple in a kind of regional city on the east coast of Australia. And he came from South Korea, a smaller built Asian guy who used to get bullied a lot, so much that he used to get picked up and put into bins. And it got him on a quest in terms of what is my identity. And indeed, I believe that's why he is one of the best creative voices on the planet. If you just sound like everybody else, where you're lost in the masses, you're in the bloody waters of competition. But if you can be uniquely you and not win everybody, but partner up with the right person, then you swim in the blue ocean of opportunity. Check it out. You're going to enjoy it. Matt from Korea, his joke, and I'm going to say it from South Korea, not North Korea, because they're all wondering if he's like related to Kim Jong-un. But he comes here and he's adopted by a family in working regions of Newcastle. So he lands in Newcastle looking different. Can I say smelling different? I think you smell different if you eat a lot of kimchi, but looking different, yeah. Sounding different, garlic. Very, very garlic and lots of chili sauce there. Okay. And then kind of lands himself there. So I just thought this would be a great thing to hear from Matt and especially around identity and why it's so important. So we do the 3-2-1 format. What are your 3 lessons? What are the 2 questions? And usually the 2 questions that I like to pick out is there's an imposter or counterfeit question. And then there's a question around hope or destiny or identity. And then also, what's the one next step for us to consider as entrepreneurs? So welcome, Matt, and we're privileged to have you join us.
No worries. Can everyone hear me? That's always my first question. Yeah, so it's great to be on the pod. And I guess just starting off, if someone had to write a book about your life, I mean, what lessons would you have in yours? I want you to think about that for a second. And my dad had a year 10 education. He dropped out. He went to Toronto High School, was in trouble with the 3 Ps. My dad, parents, the principal, and you guess it, the police. So like he was always like a bit of a rebel on the back, like as a kid, and kicking in Newcastle. But he eventually found himself, he's a survivor and a fighter. He found himself in insurance, and he then found himself in financial planning. And back then, you didn't have to have degrees or qualification to be a financial planner. So he had a year 9, year 10 education, financial planning, and he found himself one time, for many years, actually, top 5 in the country for financial planning. And he said to me, "Son, you don't have to be book smart to be successful in life, but you need to be street smart." And I'm like, "What the hell does that mean?" And he's like, "Well, he never explained it to me." He never really unpacked things to me that much. He's like, just be street smart. I'm like, "Well, what is street smart?" So I had that in my head as like a young primary school kid. He'd always just drumming in my head, street smart, street smart, street smart. And then occasionally he'll point out stuff in movies, or we point something out in someone on the street, like, "Oh, that person, I can tell that person's lying. That's being street smart." I'm like, oh, "Okay, so street people can read minds. That's great. Thanks, Dad, for the tip." Yeah. So I had street smart in my mind. All right. Growing up in Newcastle, my sister and I look completely like my sister's Taiwanese. Like she looks like me, even though we're not blood related. And my parents look completely different to me. And so it looked like we were literally kidnapped, like walking down the street of Newcastle, holding these 2 white people's hands and people looking at my sister and I going, "Hey, little boy, are you okay? Do you need me to call somebody?" And it didn't really bother me until like went to school and people started pointing out things about why don't you like your mom? Why don't you like your dad? So these all planted little seeds in my head of difference. And then when my parents split up when I was 6, that was when I got really quite traumatized, and I moved house 13 times as a kid. And I think it's really important that if you see anyone who seems to be doing okay with their life, I mean, don't assume that they were born with a silver spoon in their bloody mouth. I'll tell you that much, because it's not always the case. And there are some rare people that were just given it, but in this country that we live in Australia, I don't know why it's the top poppy is to assume that anyone who's doing well for themselves was lucky or was just given it by an inheritance or a will. It's absolute bullcrap. It discourages people from trying. It makes people want to hide their gifts. It makes people hesitant to be able to truly flourish in the area. And I think a lot of us are reserved, and a lot of us do get a bit insecure about, hey, I'm smart, admitting that, or I'm world class at this. Because in Australia, the Australian in us goes, mate, you can't say that. But you can't say that. You're cocky, you're up yourself, you're an arrogant, blah, 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 right? But in other countries, they're fine with that. In America, we all know that's totally like, you be you, man. If you want to have Peter Lowe Ministries, or you want Ella's graphic design, if you want your name and stuff, you go for it. We're not going to, all the best here. It's the American dream. But our country is different. And I felt that early on in life. I really did feel that early on in life that I felt quite lost, quite disorganized, not quite sure who I was. And I thought about those questions very early in my life. Probably wasn't shielded from my parents with some adult themes. So I grew up pretty quickly and had very dark thoughts as a kid. And it wasn't until I went to church and I went to youth group when I was 12, 13, and was surrounded by older people that I still thought were cool, but they had different values, that I realized, yeah, there are answers to these questions. But I really struggled, guys. Like, I think one of the first lessons I did struggle with is to be able to admit that I'm good at something, that I'm actually really, really good at picking patterns in the world and interpreting dreams, and to be able to turn an idea and go, okay, I've got 5 options just off the cuff here, and they'll all work. I assumed that my gift was everyone else's gift. I thought that my strength was, if I saw something or heard something, like when I started learning music, for example, because I toured as a musician for years, and I would hear a song on the radio and knew what key it was in without any musical theory, like much theory at all. And I'd play at church band and worship band at the time, and people were like, "Oh yeah, what's the chart for that? What's the music for that? What's the chord for that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's G, guys. Can't you tell?" And I just thought it was normal, and obviously it was a gift, right? And I just can't help but to wonder how many abilities we have like that you're not aware of.
I love that. I think I was thinking about this other day. Some of us can struggle with a lack of humility, and some of us can struggle with a lack of confidence. And if I think about most of us, I think most of us aren't being who we're destined to be, more because we lack confidence rather than we lack humility. Like we're so obsessed with being humble, but at the expense of not being confident. So there's this technical talent that you have, but the confidence, how does the confidence relate to identity? So you kind of said, like, just picturing that you're adopted from South Korea, your sister is adopted from Taiwan. You walk down working class Newcastle, and if you don't know Newcastle, it's famous for steelworks and ports.
Newcastle.
Newcastle. That's Newcastle. Newey. And then your parents, who have got a faith, split up when you're 6 years old. And so there's these kind of multiple shakes of, who am I? Identity. Did confidence in you was there part of it that came from identity? And I'm not trying to pick at it if that's not you. It's a legitimate question.
My confidence, there's a couple of things. I always split into three. There's the man, there's the mission, and there's the message, right? For your life, right? The man meaning you as a person, you as a woman, you as an individual. I think I knew I was confident. Confidence comes from a technical ability, like the technical confidence comes from repeatable outcomes. So like you aim at something, you practice it repetitively, you have a deep understanding of it so that it just doesn't remain a fluke. I think that's the biggest thing about technical ability is if you're a magician, even every card trick you do it so often that you know probability wise you're going to do it every time versus it was just a once off, right? Because anyone can just kick a ball and score a goal as a fluke when the position's right? But technicality, I knew over time, I think most people can get confident in that. But I think the man, the person in me didn't become real confident until I started believing in something more than just trying to please people. I think a lot of people are trying to, look, I'll put it frankly to you guys. I think a lot of people dress for other people. Why do you wear the clothes you wear? Why do you drive the car that you drive? And a lot of it, if you boil it down, might be because it makes you appear a certain way.
But I even think that it comes in the other way as well. Like you can often listen to that and go, "Oh, I'm dressing up." Sometimes you might be dressing down to please people.
That's right.
And so, I can say there was a time in my mid-20s, I got promoted very quickly in a large organization, and I wanted to be one of the crew. And so I didn't even realize it, but I wore a suit to work, but my boss actually pulled me aside one day and he said, "Pete, you're one of the sharpest guys around. Some feedback?" I'm there. He's like, "Bit sloppy." Mm-hmm. He literally said, I go to work in a suit, but I had this kind of, and I probably, if you took a photo, you wouldn't have thought it was that sloppy, but I had a sloppy demeanor. And it's kind of like, mate, we're meeting up with this honcho, dress well, dress sharp, stand tall. Yeah. And I just really, my insecurity, kind of drove me. And so I think that's a good one, right? Because often people go, "Yeah, well, I'm not wearing designer labels, so I'm not trying to impress." But it's kind of like, well, like you kind of dress for the occasion. It's actually rude to turn up at a wedding dressed inappropriately, just like it's rude to turn up at a funeral dressed inappropriately, right? You dress for the occasion, and that's certainly professionally too.
There's two things in that, Pete, that I learned. One is, who you're trying to impress will determine how you dress, right? And second, what really changed my life was something not externally, because people try and put external things on to try and change the internal. I want to be more confident, so I'll put this on. I want to be more confident, so external, internal. No, it's got to start inward. And for me, it was actually a revelation of my value wasn't really boiled down to my achievements, because I just used deduction, and I had a revelation from God as well, my personal faith. But it was more that no matter what I achieved or what I did or what I accumulated, I'm as good as the poorest person or the richest, but we're all the same. Death renders us as equals. But the thing that makes this valuable right now, it's me, right? And who made me? And it just keeps going back. So it's not like it's where, am I the mannequin and the clothes are wearing me, or am I wearing the clothes because I know I give it value and I don't need it necessarily to give me worth? So that is the thing that gives me ultimate confidence now. It's the realization that this laptop, this building, everything that I really do is valuable, not because it is inherently valuable in itself. It's because I give it value and you give things value, because we have, as human beings, the ability to be able to give life to dead things. We're given to dead things all the time. Without your attention, without your attendance, everything you basically have is useless. Facebook's useless. Zoom's useless. Money's useless. it's only useful because we collectively believe in it and we act upon it. That's where true value comes from and confidence comes from. For me, it's like I walk into a room and know I can bring life here because most of the stuff here is just I see the matrix. That's the matrix right there. If you want to use an analogy, is that you're walking into something and you're in it but not of it, right? And that comes from a deep realization of my worth is not from external, because the fact that I give love to things, guys, the fact that I give value and attention to things shows that I have value, because you cannot give what you don't have.
But tell me, as you start, you talked about some confidence that comes through competence. You talked about the 3 M's, man, mission, and what was the last one?
Message.
Message. As you start living out this, what's the reaction of the people around you? Are they celebrating you, or are they saying, who are you?
I think people are less confused, about who you are. Because I think when you have one of those things done, the mission, and you're like, okay, I'm good at my job. I'm in the right place for my competency, like to contribute. If you're good at your gifts are just being used, you always will have opportunities in that domain. And people, the more clearer you are, guys, on the 3, the man, the mission, the message, the more things you attract that are specific to that. And you're going to have people try and seduce you or try and distract you from that. That just comes part and parcel of knowing who you are. Knowing who you are actually attracts a lot of, I guess, there's the security in knowing who you are, but there also is like an enemy that comes against that. Because think about someone right now on your network that you would rate right up there with, they know who they are through and through. There's no convincing them otherwise, right? And just hold that there in your thought, just up there. And then on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, can you think of somebody who could easily be swayed out of their current identity into something else? They could be argued out of it. It takes one question or one event to be able to totally destroy the foundation they're on, and they don't know who they are again. The realization of knowing who I am as a man, what mission I'm on, and what message I carry, and the importance of finding a message and refining your message as well, means that in tough times I'm not as shaken, and people therefore are much more like they want me around because I'm not anxious. I'm not really an anxious person because of that. Because if I don't have a message, then I get really anxious. Because if the mission, like my mission gets like COVID hits and 2 years down, what do I have if I don't have a message? And who am I if I don't know who I am? I think the biggest struggle today is we look at one thing in our lives and say that that's the only thing that matters and everything's built upon it. Work's it.
And I love that.
The recipe of a disaster.
Yeah. And I think it's very easy for us to go around trying to avoid a battle. And it's that line to kind of go, if you got nothing to die for, you got nothing to live for. And the question that I'd ask is, what arena are you in? And I think about the Teddy Roosevelt quote, the credit belongs to the man in the arena whose face is covered by mud and sweat and tears, who at the very worst knows defeat. But, at the very best knows the highs of victory. But it says his place will never be with those poor, timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. And I think there's such a culture, especially socially right now, where we commentate and we're actually in the spectator stand. And some of us think that being in the spectator stand is the same as being in the arena. Because I think when you do find your mission and your purpose, everyone is going to have to pick up the sword and then stand on a side. Okay, so you find your mission, you pick up your sword, you're going to stand on a side. And at the same time, you're going to find enemies. You're going to find critics. And I'd probably say whether you pick up your sword or not, you're going to have a critic. So criticism doesn't change whether you have conviction or not, but at least you will look and live in a life where you kind of stand for yourself. Because I don't know about you, I see it all the time when I'm speaking to entrepreneurs, and maybe their dreams early, and they go, I spoke to my best friends about it, and they all, you don't find supporters. You'll probably go, for every entrepreneur listening, you go, when you talked about starting your business, I would pretty much guarantee that everyone had someone close to them who objected, who said that was stupid, that's not you,
Risky.
it's risky, it's all these types of things, right? So I think wherever you are, to say, what arena, what are you going to die on? Some of the things you're fighting about aren't worth dying on, not worth hanging your cross upon, and not worth falling your sword upon. So what's your arena, and what are you going to fight on is a good one. So I guess now there's a couple of things that I'm keen to kind of understand the questions you're asking yourself around these times as you kind of laid into your competency, you started stretching out, you started, I'm going to be who I am. And I'm sure it wasn't just one thing, but what were kind of the questions, the imposter questions or the fear questions, and then how'd you overcome it? And then what were the possibility and hope question that kind of came along with that as well?
One of the challenges that I guess competence brings, if you start getting really good at one thing, you start realizing, crap, I could do 7 things. I could do so many things. I could do 3. There's 3 opportunities from this one. There's 7, there's 10 things I can do, but we got 168 hours a week. The question I was asking is, what do I do? Like, what do I do, and how long do I do it for, and what's it for? It was really hard for me to decide. Do I go down the music route, and build that up? It's funny because in school, like, you're always thinking from most of your life, permission. You need permission to do things. And a lot of adults still feel like they act like that. Like, you might be like, your stated ideal might be like, I don't need permission to do anything. I know I'm a grown up. I can wipe my own ass, right? But how many times do we feel like we go to an advisor for them to tell us what we already know we need to do? But it's like, you've got the permission now to be able to actually do it. I felt like I was that for a long time, because I was like, if I start this one road, say music or speaking or being an author, or I was a celebrant at one point, I've been so many things the last 10 years and it's only been the last few years that I've really niched. But before you've seen this current version of me, and I might change again, I had so many versions of what I did. I was dabbling all these things, and I was doing things pretty well, but I reached a certain potential and I couldn't go any further. And I was like, how do I juggle all this stuff? And I eventually had to go, okay, I need to scale this up. I need to let go of this. And it's like, oh man, what have I created? I've created like several jobs for myself, when I was in my early 20s, and it was really crazy. And and what justified it to me is like, oh, they're all earning money, like they're all doing pretty well. How do I let go of one, and that was tricky. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation before, but I really had to come back down to the framework of who am I, what's my mission, and what's my message. And if I looked at those 7 things I was doing, I could already halve them when I had a framework or philosophy. It's like, okay, I don't really need to do the music touring anymore because it's not my mission. It's not my mission. I know it's not my mission to do that. It's just something I'm really good at, right? And it doesn't have the helping people that I know I need to do. I'm not really around the people who need help. And 3, it's taken away from my family and relationships. I'm on the road too long. So when you have all these opportunities, you need to have something like God or an auditing system to pull you out of it and be values driven. Be like, how does this fit? Is this within my gifts? Is this within my passion? Is this within my ability, my values? Right. And passion is like such an interesting word because it's thrown around all the time. Like, all of us might have a definition of passion, but for me, one little trigger point is, what fires you up about the world? What pisses you off about the world? Like, what do you want? What adversity exists that you're like, that really, I just can't get that out of me. Like, I just wish someone would help these women. I really wish those people, these unfortunate, like, down outers would be helped, right? Don't assume, like I said, with the gift I had, I assumed that everyone had the same gift. Don't assume that everyone has that same passion to help those types of people, because that could be the universe. That could be your calling, these certain words that we use in certain circles that you carry around that no one else has in your area. So think about that.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I think that a couple of things, there's that term, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so instead of trying to say yes to lots of things and doing them averagely, whether that's strategically, purposeful, or operational, what are the core things that you need to be doing? What's the one right next step? But you also talked about enemy. And I love that thought is if it's true that you have an enemy, how does that enemy take you down?
Hollywood pitches, Pete, like seduction and Satan as a very obvious thing. You know, like,
or one of the things might be distraction.
Yeah.
You know, like we can often think about the big things like, you know, drugs and whatever it might be. But I would probably say that the thing that I would often see in entrepreneurs, some vain pursuit for humility. Like sometimes you can pursue humility in a vain way. You go, I'm just being humble. I go, no, you're actually being vain because people aren't thinking about you that much. So I see that. And the second one is distraction. Like there's all these good options and an inability to focus on the right next thing. You know, and I would go in most times if I look at it, I'd go, I know how I'd get you. I'd get you by bringing a good cause in your world that's not your cause. You know, I'd bring someone in your world that you might be vain enough to think you can change that person, but you can't. Question I've got though, when you talk about finding your strengths and all these types of things. So, you know, you grow up and when you're first discovering, you're kind of getting into everything to kind of find those strengths, find those likes, find those passions. And so you approach the world like a bit of this point of, I surrender. Okay. I surrender myself to, I believe there's a good God. I believe he's got good plans and I believe he wants to do good things through me. Okay. So there's a bit of surrender. Then over time, we kind of find our strengths. Well, let's play in the area that we've been gifted in, where it fits our passions and purpose. Where's the place as you mature for the attitude of surrender? It's a loaded question because it's something that my wife and I've just recently done. You know, like I try and focus on my strengths. But if you're a bit remiss, I think sometimes you stop praying that prayer of surrender. And it becomes about manufacturing your great life and your great impact. And that sense of work, you know, letting go of your immediate needs to serve a bigger purpose in whatever fashion that is. Where do you think surrender fits in all of this? So find your strength, do it well. But is there a time, is there appropriateness for surrender to something bigger?
Yeah, definitely. I think we all render our need to someone or something, don't we? You know, like if it's your boss, your shareholders, your wife, even like human beings, or a thing that's bigger than ourselves, which is for many of us, it's a faith. And I think whatever is your ideal is your judge, right? Whatever is number one is your judge. If it's work, it will judge everything that's rendered under work. Family, it's not good enough. It's distracting from number one, which is work. So whatever is your number one will ask you to surrender for it, right? So it's a question for me of what's number one is the most important thing, because everything that follows it will be asked to be able to be surrendered at some point. So it's, people talk about faith. An audience will talk about faith like it's a wimpy thing, like it's a wuss thing, but it's actually the hardest thing to do, because at some point, so, you know, like the universe might call upon you, God might call upon you to go, time's up. Could you sacrifice his son? Could you move on? And that's just a hypothetical question. Could you move on from this thing that gives you identity and gives you provision and gives you so many great things? Could you move on from it? I want you to be something else. That's the true test of what has your heart, in my view. And to be honest, I'd struggle a lot with letting go of, and I have to check my heart all the time. It's like, if this was asked of me to quit or do something, or it just doesn't fit, it's just killing my family, or it's just killing my marriage, or it's killing, if it had between this or this, what would I choose? And if it's even, if I'm doubting it, then that's where I'm like, oh, I've got to check who I'm surrendering to at the moment.
So there's a bit there as we kind of close off. What's the one next step that you would encourage people to consider or take?
I'm not a financial advisor. I know Peter is. He's the man. Have a chat to Pete about this. But I did an exercise, and I'm just putting disclaimer. This is not financial advice. Get out a document and write out, if you haven't already, every single thing that you want to buy in your life, everything you're working on right now, like toward financially securing a house, car, holidays, whatever it is, right? Be very practical. Tally it all up, right? In the next column, add what's the purpose of all that stuff? What's the reason for all that stuff? Why that car? Why that house? Why and when you want to do it? Is why you're in such a rush? That might be the thing you come out of it. I want you to like look at that number, like monetize that number. Actually look at that number, be like, is it $5 million? Is it $10 million? For a lot of us, it actually won't be that as much as you think. And really think about like when is enough for you? I think that's the question, is when you do that exercise, like success for me that I'm currently working on, this is me in process at the moment, isn't about accumulating the most wealth in my life anymore. Isn't about having the most possessions. It's actually knowing who I am and knowing when enough is enough. And that's values driven. So I have a number at the moment and I'm pretty much there to be able to do it. And it's not as big as I actually thought it was. So I want my business to be able to serve that. I don't exist to be able to serve my business. My business exists to serve my life. And that's the next step. I just want to make sure that I not just look at P&Ls and look at all this stuff from a biz. I want to look at how it serves my life and take it as an exercise. You might find it insightful.
Love that. I think there's a lot here around values and identity. Matt and I were talking offline and how values drive behavior stronger than intent or wishes do. So as an example, if you were previously a smoker and you go out and someone says, do you want to smoke? And you say, I'm just trying to quit. What you've done is you've identified yourself as a smoker trying to quit. But if someone says, do you want to smoke? And you go, no, thanks, I've quit. You've identified as a previous smoker. And so the intent not to smoke is the same, but where you drive your identity is a stronger predictor than your intent. And so there are so many people that might be running successful companies, and I constantly hear going, but I'm not an entrepreneur or I'm not a business person. And so I think those things kind of work against them. And then when you talk about why, like, that's a great question. I want to ask myself, what happens when God gives you more than you can think or imagine? And this is where we talk about the feat of proactivity. But a quick testimony here to you, Matt, is when I wrote a goal probably 15 years ago, maybe longer, that I wanted to give a certain amount of money away. And my big capital moment was the sale of my business. And so when I actually sold my business, I didn't give the number that I wanted to give. And I actually felt like a failure because I felt like, oh, that was my big moment, and it's wrong. Okay. It's like, it's not about a number. It's about a heart of generosity. I'm being honest with how I felt. Now, my vision is being renewed and my identity is different. Like, I'm a builder of builders and I'm a kingdom builder. That's my identity. You know what I've written down? You can't see this if you're listening to it, but I've written down my next 10-year plan. You know what I've written down? I want to give it the number I wrote down 15 years ago to give away once. Over the next 10 years, I want to give that amount every year. In the next 10 years, I want to be giving, not that one. I want to give that every year. And I'm going, I don't know how. Scares me, bunch of things can, but I go, my attitude has to be different. Because I know if that's going to be the case, then potentially I'm in a position of inverted commas power and influence. And I've seen too many good people with power and influence and it does them wrong. And so because I know that's within me, I'm driving all these behaviors to go, how do you invite people in your world to listen to rub against you and to let them call some shots, not just you? Because I know where I want to go. And so I just want to encourage that everyone kind of listening to go, people keep rolling their eyes about identity, values, and purpose. And I'm going, there's got to be something strong to overcome the daily yuck. Everyone's got daily yuck. Okay. And the people that overcome the yuck better are the ones that kind of bubble to the surface. Whether that's elite sportsman or you as an entrepreneur, there's something that you do every day that's yuck. What's going to help you overcome that better and process that better than everybody else? The only thing that overcomes your short-term pain, well, the thing that's going to best overcome short-term pain is long-term purpose and value. Because if it's short-term pleasure, that's not good enough. Anyway, super cool. Hopefully that's really cool. You guys got any kind of questions? Love to hear it. Ian's got a comment. Unmute, just ask your question, and we've got room for one or two after that. But Ian, ask your question or your statement.
Mine was probably a whole podcast and my question. But it was, one of the things that I noticed, I've got small children and I also work with university graduates. And, kids kind of go into our education system with these amazing dreams and imaginations. And from what I can see, come out the other end with very few of them. And, I think we're taught in school that, you talked about permission, right? And there's this kind of idea that we're taught that we're at the mercy of some system of pickers. And so I think a lot about my young children, and I'm interested to hear, Matt, I didn't even know you very well. I don't know if you've got kids, but, how do we talk to our next generation, even if they're not our kids, about being the man in the arena or the woman in the arena and not being the spectator?
Yeah, I've got two daughters, 5 and a 3-year-old, and I've been helping youth for 10 years, with my other business I sold a couple of years ago, mentoring youth. And I agree. I think our 13 years since kindergarten, kids have to put their hand up to get permission to actually go do a wee, versus when they leave high school, they're expected to go, oh yeah, go, make your own choices. Yeah, thanks. It's not as easy said than done, is it? So I think I think it's actually, there's two opportunities. I had two trains of thoughts here. This is where, as business owners, we can really take the mantle up and help young people. Think about this, the education system in university gives you very very little workplace experience or real world experience. So be taught how to think a certain way. But I've got uni students who work for me, and all of that gets thrown out when you're in a boardroom. Yeah, when you're in meetings and things. So it's actually, the mantle needs to be on business owners to be able to provide some really good, safe environment to be able to fail and to be able to think and do. Thinkers need to do and doers need to think, right? And so often in university and all that, we're taught just to think but not do, and outside of uni, I wasn't a uni person. I did, but I didn't think a lot. So I needed to learn how to think more. So that's where business owners need to be able to go provide a training course or some part of employees onboarding to be able to provide that type of experience, shadowing you. For my guys, I do it because a lot of our guys here are young. I love the fact that Mentor Media is filled of 20-something-year-olds that are working with Amex, that are working with some of the biggest companies in the world with very little world experience, because my philosophy is it's on me to be able, I can actually teach these guys how to do. I don't have to take it upon myself. So I think there's an opportunity for business owners to do that. And I think there's also an opportunity to encourage young people to be it's not the be all and end all. I got an asterisk for my HSC. Do you know what an asterisk means? That means I got that lower score. Asterisk means it's my score was so low, it doesn't even have a number. I'm pretty proud of that, right? Look at me now. Now, but I think
you call yourself an Asian.
I know. But I think it's I think it is promoting an alternative way of thinking of how to be able to get to where you want to go. It doesn't have to be through that avenue. There has to be, that's where the street smarts and book smarts thing, they're two different universes. To be street smart is to be more leaning into experiences and having the opportunity to fail, which businesses and university doesn't want you to do it, because you get graded on your fail, you get ranked, in hierarchy of failing, which is just not part of the real world. So I think business owners, and also as people in the community, there's so many examples that are out there like me. I'm one of them. I'm not, don't replicate everything I do, geez, but it just goes to show, if we can find more role models of people who have taken a different path but ended up where they want to be, it just gives much more of confidence to people, our young people, to go like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not a nomad. I'm not just some crazy person to think that I want to do it that way. I don't know if that makes sense.
You know, I think when you said that, there's a quote that Arnold Schwarzenegger says, and he says, break the rules, don't break the law.
Yeah.
You know, why can't the for-purpose entrepreneurs be a dangerous force for good? Why can't we ripple through the generations and across the globe? Why not? Why not? Let's be that people that break the rules, that show a new way. You know, don't break the law, but let's break the rules of what people deem as normal or achievable or realistic. Mate, we could have keep going all day. I want to just close out just with a prayer of blessing upon everyone. Just want to thank you for Matt and his story, that he scored an asterisk on his HSC, that he came adopted from loving parents and across the globe, and that he's found his identity, his purpose, that he can do that confidently through competence. And just for everyone listening, may we just understand that we've all got something special, and may you help show us what that something special is, and may we unashamedly bring what is special to this world, understanding that there will be opposition, but understanding that we'll be in an arena of our choosing. And whether win or learn, we'll know. We'll never be in the spectator stand, never knowing victory or defeat or what would have, could have, or should have, but we will. We'll be in that arena, mud with sweat, blood, tears, and stand at the end of our life knowing that we did our best to live our life with a purpose. Thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. So as we end off that podcast, just a question to think about. Where are you complaining about a lack of resources when it's actually a lack of resourcefulness? Here's a guy that got adopted from another country who scored an asterisk in his ATAR, which literally means he scored so low he doesn't get a mark. And yet here he is being one of the leading creative voices across the planet. Is there something in your life that you're holding back, that it's you thinking it's a barrier, but it's actually a step up for your future? Hope that's helpful for you. Check us out. Follow us on the podcast. Check us out on Insta. Peter Lowe 100x or 100x Legacy on Insta. You can see Matt's details there on Instagram, Matt Purcell Official.